minute into our meeting, so if you can, please put into the chat church or your synod and the original land keepers, indigenous people of the place that you're in. That would be great. Okay, I have a few more people joining. Good to see you all. Okay. While we are all Lutherans restoring creation, land acknowledgement. So I invite you to solemnity as we read our land acknowledgement. As we live, work, and worship in the land that is now called the United States, on land that was stolen from indigenous peoples. As we are called to restore creation, we are also called to restore right relationship with one another. As we join in this holy vocation, we've been companions of the land, waters, and beings of Turtle Island since time immemorial. We charge our community to learn about the original and continuous stewards of the land upon cultural genocide and displacement of indigenous communities, committing ourselves to hearing and speaking the truth of that history and its ongoing effects. May we, so that we may mend what has been broken and embody Christ's gospel of abundant life. Thank you. And if you're just coming in, please do put your name and the original indigenous keepers of the land in the place that you're at. Okay, to start us off in devotion, if I can just pull it up in the background, to remind us of the land and our calling and the good thing is good.
The earth is good.
There we go. Ooh, okay, hang on.
Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Well, here are the facts. These are true, and I don't feel free. I feel buried under facts. And while it is a fact that the world is getting dangerously hotter, that humans are to blame, and that we are running out of time,
Shoot.
Should we play it at the end?
Been having tech issues on multiple channels, so thank you for your patience, and I'm sure that was a little slow and glitchy, so hopefully we'll have some better internet by the end of this meeting. I am thrilled to just get started in that case and hand it off to our two special guests for tonight, Reverend Dr. Barbara Rossing and Reverend Dr. Jim Martin-Schramm. And proposition to tell us about what the World Council of Churches is doing and how we can push the ELCA to action as well. They're going to, I will also ask them to both introduce themselves and how they come to this call, what roles you have that bring you to this call. All right, handing it off.
Post disabled participant screen sharing. So if you could make it possible for us to share.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Okay, now I'll try. Barb, why don't you start It's Liza.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'm just so honored to be working with Jim Martin-Schramm on this. I'm a board member of Lutherans Restoring Creation, and I'm now a newly elected member of the ELCA Church Council, which is then to Chicago tomorrow, and we'll have our board retreat. And one of my goals in serving on the ELCA Church Council, obviously, it's to do the work of the church and all, but I want to increase other priorities. So that's one of the things I said in my statement that I ran on. And I'm so pleased to be working on this resolution with Jim Martin-Schramm, who was the author of the ELCA climate. The other two on our team that have been working on this, but they're not on the call tonight, are retired Bishop Ann Svenningson, who was the bishop of the Minneapolis Synod, and they had a very strong Secretary Chris Berger. So the four of us have worked up this, and Jim, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Barb. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with on working with Barb over the years. Back in June of 2019, we were part of the faculty team that led we were the faculty team for the Lutheran Campus College, and our focus there was on climate stuff. And out of that came a letter from the 60-some student participants that went recommending that the ELCA develop a social message on climate change. And 4 years later, the Church Council approved that unanimously on Earth Day of 2023. So
I'll just say it was one of the funny things is Jim had been, I think, instrumental in the ELCA Care for Creation statement as well, or at least I have a statement that was written in 1996, and they said we weren't even born then. So that's why we need to do a social message on climate. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
no, that's fine. So we put together different presentations. Oh, and now I'm not able to go. Let's see here. Try a different way. Here we go. And so the first few slides are drawn from a presentation on climate change. If we'd had a chance to watch all of the video, and Gabrielle, I hope you'll put that link in the chat so all of the participants have a chance to is fabulous, and in some respects it covers very well the content of these first few slides. So how are Christians called to care for creation? We're reminded in Psalm 24 that the earth is live in it. Ultimately, we're bringing a theocentric perspective to our discussions about climate change and a moral response to climate change. A special and sacred responsibility in the book of Genesis. We're called to care for and to keep God's creation for future generations. I think it's fair. A dire threat to both present and to future generations. I'm currently out in the state of Arizona. Much of and so wildfire season is something folks are dreading this year. The other two images to the right there are the after effects of flooding, and as I understand it, we're facing a super El Nino later this year that could have really serious consequences for people living in low-lying areas and who are subject to. Barb, do you want to talk about this slide?
Well, I do, because to me this slide is so compelling. I'm not a nurse or a health professional, but when you show this slide, and Jim put it in the original slideshow that we had for the climate and this is just on human health, but some of these vector-borne diseases, dengue, this one that I didn't even know about, chikungunya, and then allergens, water quality, water the effects of climate change on human health will be, and then of course on the health of the whole planet. But this slide, I think, really says so much about why we really need to work on this problem, not around the world.
Yeah, Barb was just in Brazil, in Belém, Brazil, for the 30th Conference of the Parties of the UN Framework but part of what was going on at that meeting was celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Paris Climate Accords, where the nations of the world came together and reached key for that moment. The goal was to limit global warming to no more than 2 degrees Celsius, and ideally to get warming to follow the news, know that it's likely we're going to blow past 2.0 degrees Celsius in the next year or two, and that's pretty. So to believe that this is why climate change needs to be elevated all around in multiple venues, but especially for Christians, and in our case for members of the ELCA. The reality is our denomination has 3 decades of leadership with regard to grappling with climate change. We passed our, I think, Caring for first, at least, in 1993. And in that very statement, it talks about global warming and climate change and warns that time is short to deal with the issue. In 2020, to engage in creation care education. And then, as we've mentioned, in 2023, the social message on Earth's climate crisis was adopted. And then in 2025, on the 10th anniversary of the Paris Climate Accords. I'm going to let Barb talk more about that.
Yeah, let me just say, it was so exciting that Bishop Curry, newly installed in October, and then in Belém, Brazil, I was with Christine Moffat and a couple others from the ELCA and a wonderful ecumenical team. But basically, so he starts off his statement by quoting Beard Linke, who I see is on this call and is on the board of Lutherans. Feeding the hungry, healing the sick, caring for the stranger, and announcing good news to the poor depends on a healthy planet. So Bishop Curry started by quoting Beard Linke. And then the really important thing is this is the message I'm trying to say more and more in the articles I'm writing and everything. Yes, even if we blow past 2 degrees, the earth has incredible healing powers. And religious leaders need to say this. It's not too late. Adopted in 2023, use that term. Kairos is a New Testament word that Jesus used to announce this moment as a decisive moment of urgency, but all Kairos means this is an opportune and urgent time. I am calling this church to be more connected and sustainable. So his message, I think, and I'll just say, we had to write to him with this great statement that we could take to Brazil and use in the panels that we spoke on and share with other ecumenical partners, linking this to Jesus' message of urgency and promise. So, here it is. Okay, there's a picture of Bishop Curry, and the really important message: it's not too late. And of course, if you were on the call with Bill McKibben maybe 3 weeks ago, where he talked about we have a new moment, a second chance, because the renewable kinds of energy, solar, wind, and also battery storage are cheaper than anything else. So this is a really skip over the fossil fuel stage, hopefully. And you see now the war, how dangerous it is to be so fossil fuel dependent. But this is an urgent time, and we have the everything. Just communities and everybody. Am I talking about this? Well, I guess so. Metanoia is another Greek word. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's you.
Okay. Your noia is your, I usually translate this as repentance, but it's much more than it's turning yourself around, turning our world around, turning our communities around. So we're the World Council of Churches in introducing this idea of the ecumenical decade of, it was adopted in June of 2025, and we have ELCA members on the Central Committee of the World Council who voted for it. But the descriptions of this 10-year process now that we're on, this so turning ourselves around, and then systemic change, transformation, and it as Angelique Walker-Smith there says in that quote, we have had decades in solidarity with women. We've had decades against violence, we've had decades against racism, and now is the ecumenical worship service. Actually, it was interfaith that we had in the middle of the 2 weeks of the Balaam climate negotiations. And this is in the Anglican Cathedral in Balaam. What was really powerful to me, those banners that people are carrying, they're quilted banners. I wrote about it in my article in Living Lutheran, in case any of you get that. I had a big picture of those banners. This was in the climate march that they carried those banners, and each one has a photo of an environmental activist who was killed for their work for the environment. And then they carried these banners in the procession into the church on Sunday, quite moving. And then there on the right, you see me with Angelique Walker-Smith, our North American Vice President, and Regina Banks, who was, she heads up the Public Policy Office for the ELCA in California, and she was one of our representatives as well. So it was great to be in this worship service. And that's where, for the first time, I heard from Angelique about this World Council of Churches Ecumenical Decade of Climate Justice Action. Let's see if it'll play here. Well, they're singing, but she'll get up to the microphone, and hopefully when she starts speaking, it'll be a little better. Sorry about this. Anyway, I love the way the altar had all these plants on it, the whole space carrying in the climate march, and then also in the worship service, people carried living symbols of our planet and its wonderful life. And of course, we were in the Amazon, so it was very rich.
You
Me permitam trazer saudações.
from the World Council of Churches. We formally adopted by the member churches of the world the ecumenical decade of climate justice action.
Nós adotamos formalmente esse documento que é chamado a Década Ecumênica de Ação por Justiça Climática.
The World Council, yes, you may clap. Please, please.
Por favor, podem aplaudir.
I am pleased to say the World Council of Churches is always timely and relevant around the trends that happen in our world. We have had decades in solidarity with women.
Nós já tivemos décadas de solidariedade com as mulheres,
Against violence,
contra a violência,
and against racism.
contra o racismo.
And now we say climate justice brings all of that together for this moment.
Okay.
Oops, sorry.
So that was what gave me the idea. I mean, you probably get emails from the ELCA about wear black on Thursdays because of the World Council of Churches decade against violence and in solidarity with women. We want this decade of climate justice action to be just as powerful in the ELCA as the other ones have been. And I loved it where she said it's a spiritual journey. It's about prophetic witness and practical actions. The World Council of Churches is aligned with you in this great movement for climate justice. We thank God for you and we look forward to the journey. So it got me thinking, this is a way we can get the ELCA to do more on climate justice action. And it's a 10-year pilgrimage, so we've got time. We already obviously do a lot, as Jim said, with the messages, and certainly Lutherans Restoring Creation is contracted by the ELCA to help with the creation care table and other things like that. But we want to see even more, much more climate justice action.
So this is a screenshot of the web page for the Ecumenical Decade of Climate Justice Action, and the link is down here below. For those of you that are viewing this in the recording, you should be able to hover over the link, and it's an active link. And then, of course, there are these sections to the website where you can learn more. They're still developing the website, so not all sections are fully developed yet, but it's really exciting. The WCC's Decade for Climate Justice Action has 6 pathways. One is to try to transform our theology and worship by integrating eco-theologies and the season of creation into our worship life. Another is to promote holistic analysis, that is to connect climate justice issues with gender, race, and economics, race, sex, and class. Another is to equip faith communities. That's really central to why we're promoting this, is so that our congregations throughout the ELCA, as well as our camps and our colleges and other ministries of the ELCA, can be equipped to address climate change in various ways. And the WCC will be developing resources to that effect. To mobilize collective action. Like Barb said, wearing black on certain days to remember violence against women. In this case, the ideas they have are global fasts and pilgrimages and other forms of interfaith campaigns related to climate justice. Of course, advocating for systemic change politically in terms of supporting climate litigation and fossil fuel non-proliferation, various forms of greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies, and then to invest in grassroots solutions by funding renewable energy and in indigenous-led protections. So these are the pathways from the WCC, and hopefully the ELCA will join in these efforts and even develop some specific strategies within each of these 6 pathways to accomplish these goals. So our goal, Barb and I and Ann and Chris, is to galvanize the ELCA for climate action via participation in the World Council of Churches Decade of Climate Justice Action. The ELCA is a member communion of the World Council of Churches, and we have been from the start, a very active member. And so this just makes sense to us. So we have developed a resolution that would ultimately wind up in the lap of the ELCA Church Council, because we don't have a churchwide assembly this year. And some synods are not holding assemblies this year. So we have 2 versions of the same resolution. One is for congregations and synods holding assemblies in 2026, and the other is for congregations not holding synod assemblies in 2026. And you can, again, for those viewing this in the recording, all of these links are active. I checked them this morning, and you should be able to download them there.
And can I just say a word here? So I'm on the National Church Council. You realize we really are a democracy. Our church is a democracy. The National Church only does, not only, but mainly does what synods ask it to do. And if you were at the churchwide assembly in Phoenix, you saw that, but even at church council meetings. So for example, we're going to have now a new rural life or rural ministry statement because 3 synods asked for it. So I know it probably sounds kind of like sausage making, having to do these resolutions with the whereases and the resolve, but that's how the church decides what business is going to get done. So it's really, really important to participate in that process if you're willing. And many synods are. We've already heard it from, I think, four 5 synods. I'm going to talk to a couple more that are going to bring this forward, but it only takes a few synods and then the church council will really act on it. But if we could get 20 synods even, that would be so great. And you are part of this.
So what's in the resolution? This slide deals with the whereas statements. Those of you that are familiar with these resolutions know that there's whereas statements and followed by resolves. So at the outset, we summarize the history of ELCA social teachings and assembly action on climate change. We affirm the ELCA's recent social message, Earth's climate crisis. We lift up Bishop Curry's recent exhortation that it's not too late to protect our climate. And we emphasize that the call to decisive action will require bold resourcing of additional churchwide staff members solely dedicated to climate justice. I think the reality is it might be closer to reassigned staff time, but nevertheless, we hope there will be dedicated staff working on this and helping ELCA congregations and synods participate in the WC's ecumenical decade of climate action. So it's a decade-long focus here, and that's why having staffing is key. The resolution goes on to include a series of resolve statements, which urge every congregation, synod, ELCA-related educational institution, affiliated ministry, separately, you can see the whole kitchen sink, to commit to active participation. We invite various expressions of the ELCA to be guided by the convictions to guide discernment and actions that are in the social message. There's a lot of detail in there. We're not going to go through here. And then urge the ELCA churchwide organization to launch a fundraising campaign, Climate Justice Action for the Life of the World, which Barb will talk more about a little later, or you can talk about
well,
it
I
now.
can say, okay, right now, I'll just read. This is what Ann Svenningson wrote, because it's very moving to me why the fundraising is so important. She says, the fundraising campaign is critical to our successful involvement, as we discovered through the ELCA malaria campaign from 2011 to 2015. The $15 million raised to fight malaria also generated increased awareness and stronger engagement across our whole church. Sunday school children, college students, congregations, synods, camps, ELCA, everyone was inspired to provide millions of dollars of malaria nets, a tangible effort that appealed to members of all ages. So we also lift up the ELCA Good Gifts catalog as an example that people love to contribute to. There's a climate resilience kit in this, but her point is that if we have a fundraising campaign, it helps fund the positions, obviously the staff and budget, but more than that, it engages people. And I think she's got a really exciting way of saying this. And we already have commitments of $200,000. So we're 1/5 of the way there.
So Barb, why don't you tackle this next slide? I think there's
okay.
next 2 slides, and then I'll handle the example thing.
Okay, great. Well, our church is composed of 3 levels, although as well, there's all the camps and everybody, but your congregation is key. So if you've got time, you can get the resolution passed in your congregation, but also all that you do. I mean, my congregation does, we have a creation care team. We do, well, we put solar panels on our middle school. We do all kinds of things, but whatever you do at your congregation, Jim led an energy webinar earlier this year, or in 2025 about energy projects congregations can do. And then the synods, some synods are obviously bigger than others. My synod is pretty little, but the work that's done at synods, especially several in Minnesota, they actually have staff dedicated to this, and that, let me just say, at the government level, because our federal government took our country out of the Paris Climate Accords, Trump did that on his first day in office. What we saw in Brazil was the really strong importance of local, state, and other levels of action now. Don't wait for the federal government to re-enter the Paris process, but get moving at your state and local government as well. So that would be analogous to the Synod, I guess. And then at the ELCA, certainly the churchwide office provides staff for all of our ecumenical decades, the decade Solidarity with Women and against racism. So we would expect this to be led out of the churchwide office, but also be in touch with all of us. All right, so here's for your congregation. I hope you are going to do something for Earth Day, April 22nd. The Sunday closest to that is the first Sunday after Easter, but you can do something with the season of creation, which is the month of September. Your regular liturgies can include all kinds of prayers for creation as well as educational programs. Well, Lutherans Restoring Creation has a great creation care covenant you can use. And Lutherans Restoring Creation is lifted up in all of this. I mean, our organization is really key to getting the ELCA moving. And then certainly pastoral care, because climate anxiety is a real problem. And one of the best cures for climate anxiety, not in addition to going outside, of course, I find, is getting together with other people and with a special focus on our youngest people. All right, Jim, you do this one.
Okay, sure. So another thing that the resolution in the resolve section talks about is urging congregations, camps, or colleges to, quote, walk the talk through physical and systemic transformation. So in terms of emissions and energy, land use holdings, modeling resiliency, building relationships that empower people, trying to be the light for the world, show the way, walk the talk. And so there are lots of examples that are available. Barb encouraged me to talk about Luther College. I spent the better part of 30 years there on the faculty and had a role to play in the college's commitments to energy efficiency and renewable energy as part of their goal to become carbon neutral by 2030. And so the college has invested in the far right. There is a 1.6 megawatt wind turbine, and then they have 1.7 megawatts of installed solar. And between those two, plus the major investments in energy efficiency, the college is on track for reducing its emissions by 2030. They've reduced their emissions by over 70% in the 21-22 academic year. And you can kind of see how that flows. And of course, this is based on annual greenhouse gas reporting information, all based on audited financial statements of the college. So this is just an example. I mean, our congregations are a much smaller version of a huge higher education institution. But the point is to show that it is possible to achieve reductions along the time frame that is kind of required. The resolution urges all expressions of the ELCA, but especially for our synods, to urge our congregations and the ministries of the ELCA within those synods to reduce their emissions 50% by 2030. Now it's 2026, but this is what the ELCA was asking the federal government to do. And so in 2023, in the social message, we said, well, if we're going to tell Uncle Sam to cut emissions 50%, maybe we ought to be trying to do the same things ourselves. These are aspirational targets, and that was the case at Luther. There's no legal obligation to reduce their emissions 100% by 2030. But nevertheless, that aspirational target has led to a 72% reduction. Key also to this is for our synods to advocate for scientific literacy. We have colleges and universities, we have schools that some of our congregations host, and emphasizing the importance of scientific literacy with regard to global warming and climate change is really key, as is legislative advocacy. We have state advocacy offices in, I don't know, 17 states. And we have then, of course, a national group of folks in Washington, D.C. that do an excellent job in terms of advocating for not all forms of legislation and not all topics. But in this case, the ELCA has been a good and active participant encouraging support for bills that address global warming and climate change.
And can I just say those priorities, we didn't make these up. Jim and Chris and Ann and I didn't make up those on that previous slide. They're all in the ELCA climate message that was passed in 2023.
Yeah.
But because it was a social message and not a social statement, it didn't have implementing resolutions. Like social statements do. So, this is jargonese with the ELCA, but so some of the commitments have sort of maybe sat on the shelf. I hate to say it that way, but this is a time then we can use this resolution to pull them off the shelf and get them implemented now in resolves. And the final resolve in the long resolution says, and the ELCA Church Council will invite the Conference of Bishops. We have to use careful language, but that we need to get the stuff implemented.
So Barb, you were going to talk about this slide.
Yeah, so we have wonderful staff in the ELCA. I realize for racial justice, we have Jennifer DeLeon, and others for gender justice, we have Mary Stroyford and others. And for climate justice, we do have Christine Moffat in the Washington, D.C. office, but we want to see staffing in the programmatic work in the ELCA itself. Certainly now Listen to Restoring Creation plays a contract role, but to just see that having staffing who can programmatically resource this stuff really makes a difference. So that's what we want to see happen, and the fundraising campaign can do it. So we did just make up $1 million. I will say that was not in the climate. This was Ann's idea. Okay. But this idea that even a fundraising campaign can help mobilize people. People get excited. And already we've met families, couples who want to give to this particular effort because they're so concerned about their grandkids and future generations and the climate health of the world.
So the goal here again is for congregations to consider this resolution that you can access through the Lutherans Restoring Creation website, to approve it, and then if your synod is not holding a synod assembly this year, to send that resolution to your synod council, which is the official entity that acts when you don't have a year with a synod assembly, and then hopefully, and implore or encourage the synod council to approve the resolution and to pass it on to the ELCA Church Council for consideration and action. If you do have a synod assembly, the congregation approves it, introduces it as a resolution at the synod assembly. If it passes, then it would go to the church council. Do I have that right, Barb?
Yeah, and I would say I love synod assemblies. I mean, because there will be a hearing about it. People can talk about it. They can talk about their own experiences with climate. And make it as fun as you can. But yeah, that's the process. And in fact, this week already, the Minneapolis Area Synod Council is going to pass it. So it's happening even as we speak. Yes. I asked Jim to put this slide in because this is one of my favorite statements in the social message. And we got this back when we were getting feedback. To add in, we can engage in acts of community organizing to build stronger relationships and more resilient communities that can take action to create meaningful climate solutions and help people understand that they have the power to make lasting change. People really have the power at this moment to make a difference. And that's what we need to be about, is that message of hope. It's not too late. I just want to read one quote from, this is from Pope John Paul and His Holiness Archbishop Patriarch Bartholomew. It is not too late. God's world has incredibly healing powers. Within a single generation, we can steer the earth towards our children's future. Let that generation start now with God's help and blessing. And then Bishop Curry's in his message as well. It's not too late. There is time, and people mobilizing. That's the most important thing right now.
We have a brief clip from Pope Leo emphasizing the same thing. And, I mean, it's always helpful to have the Pope on your side.
So I'll just say it was Sunday midweek in the negotiations in Brazil, and everybody thought it's going to stall out. Nothing's going to happen. And then Pope Leo sent this message, and it really was, it started things.
Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can get it to go here. Okay.
The creation's crying out in floods, droughts, storm.
Oops, sorry.
This heat. 1 in 3 people live in great vulnerability because of these climate changes. To them, climate change is not a distant threat, and to ignore these people is to deny our shared humanity. There's still time to keep the rise in global temperatures below 1.5 degrees centigrade with the windows closing. As stewards of God's creation, we are called to act swiftly with faith and prophecy to protect the gift he entrusted to us. Paris Agreement has driven real progress and remains our strongest tool for protecting people and the planet. But we must be honest. It is not the agreement that is failing. We are failing in our response. What is failing is the political will of some. True leadership means service and support at a scale that will truly make a difference. Stronger climate actions will create stronger and fairer economic systems. Strong climate actions and policies. Both are an investment in a more just and stable world.
So even though the Roman Catholics are not members of the World Council of Churches, I wanted to show that clip. Pope Leo, of course, is from Chicago, but I just think it's so wonderful that the whole world's religious communities, interfaith as well, we're all joining together now in trying to take more robust climate action.
And Barb referred to this webinar that happened, 3 weeks ago or so. Barb, do you want to say more about it?
Well, I thought, okay, I'm prejudiced, I know, but I thought it was the best talk Bill's ever given that I've heard. He's so much more hopeful in this because in his new book, he really proves that the renewable energy now is unstoppable because this is the cheapest energy there is. And he talks a lot about indigenous communities. He talks about the global South African communities. He's got great stories in the book. And some of those he told to us in this 1 hour, well, he gave about a 30-minute talk and then we had a Q&A. But it's he started by thanking the Lutherans in Minnesota for organizing and resisting. He linked the struggle for democracy with the climate justice struggle and says that if we want more democracy, we've got to have decentralized energy systems. He was just very powerful. So I recommend the book and I also recommend the webinar.
Yeah. And my understanding is that everybody who registered for this webinar will get a link to the recording. Yes. And when you get the recording, then all of these links should be active for you. So when I say watch on YouTube, you can click on that and get to it. And then this is our last slide. In a moment, I'll stop sharing and we'll open it up for questions and answers. But feel free to reach out to me or to Barbara with your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Barbara, you want to say anything else before we go into
thanks. It's a pilgrimage, and we're on it with you. So yeah, let us know questions. You know, obviously we don't know what the money would all go for because the ELCA would develop those, but certainly we've got great ideas.
So I see there's 28 comments in the chat.
Or yes, and don't worry, I have been looking as well.
Okay.
And before we open it up to questions, I think you can hear me now, right? My Wi-Fi is working. I don't know what happened, but hi everybody. And I figured before we stop the recording to talk amongst ourselves and maybe break out into groups, I believe I can share what Baird Linke had created for us. And Baird, I had mentioned that this is the gift that keeps giving. This is very much a prayer and kind of bringing us full circle to what you both opened with as to why do we do this as church. Is that okay if I share that real quick before we go on?
Sure. I think it's only two minutes. So
it's only 2 minutes. Yeah. So please stay on, everybody. It'll make you feel good.
Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Well, here are the facts. These are true, and I don't feel free. I feel buried under facts. And while it is a fact that the world is getting dangerously hotter, that humans are to blame, and that we are running out of time, there's more to be said than can fit in the trend line of parts per million atmospheric analysis and the background extinction rate and congressional deadlocks and fossil fuel subsidies. The Earth is good. And it's not naive to believe that that fact matters just as much as the others. The Earth is good and it is worth saving. It's worth serving. This world is worth serving. Isn't it worth believing in? Christians have a stubborn belief that the ultimate truth of the world is healing. That isn't a denial of death or woundedness. It's a refusal to let those facts crowd out the whole truth. The world in fear and despair and pain is in desperate need of faith, hope, and love. And so are we. These are gifts that God offers lavishly, foolishly, abundantly. We cannot do the work of serving this world if we are not rooting ourselves in the gifts that we need most of all. This is a call to everyone who feels buried alive under the weight of the climate disaster, who mourns what we have lost and fears what is to come. Do not do this alone. Faith, hope, and love are not luxuries. They are as essential as food and water and air. So come to the table, to the water, to the spirit of the one who loves you. Receive the love that you hope to give, wounded hand to wounded heart. May God Creator bless you and keep you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again so much, Baird, for making that. It is quite a prayer. So with that, I will close recording.